A very common technique is to heat a reaction under reflux conditions. So let's go over how to do that. We typically will use a round bottom flask in this situation, which can be held and propped up by a cork ring really nicely. You want to start by building a good apparatus using a firm clamp. So first I'm going to place my clamp, make sure it's kind of tight, and then I'm going to clamp my flask in here. So you can pinch those handles together and then spin that screw really nicely. Okay, if this is firm, we'll be in good shape. I'm just going to bring that down so we can see it a little bit better. So now let's load the flask with the reactants. We will need a heat source, and we're going to use what's called a heating mantle. It has sort of a round plug. Okay. It's going to go like this. Right, now if you're wondering how that's going to plug in, that's a good question. You need a cord with a round plug that will fit to the heating mantle. Okay. And next up, we're going to support the heating mantle using a ring clamp. Now, we don't want to rest the heat right on the floor of the hood. We want to have it elevated a little bit. And that's how we're going to prop it up using the cork ring. I'm sorry, the ring clamp, like so. All right, now we do not plug this into the wall. We need to give our heat source a dial. So we need what's called a temperature controller. Okay, there's a couple of styles of this in the lab. This is a common one. If we turn it around, you can see there's an outlet. So I take my heating mantle cord and I plug that into the temperature controller. Just find a good spot for that. And then I can take the temperature controller cord and plug that into an outlet in the wall. Okay. All right, now that would just be heating. And if we boiled this flask, the vapor would escape. So next is the reflux part. You need a piece of glass called a reflux condenser. Okay. You should have a couple of these in your drawer. There's a ground glass joint. It should fit perfectly in your flask, like so. Okay. You don't need to clamp this if the flask is clamped firmly at the neck. So the reflux condenser has a tube in the inside that's jacketed by this outside part with the two ports, okay? So this outside is a layer that jackets the inner tube that, if you look at it head on, is hollow and open, okay? So when you're getting ready to heat something, we want to grease the joint that's closest to the heat source. So one little dab of the grease on each side, about 180 degrees apart. Then you put that into your flask and then just twirl it around to spread the grease around. Gives it a nice firm seal. Okay. Now if you'll notice, we don't put anything on the top of the reflux condenser. So the idea here is that my reaction flask will heat when I turn on the heat source. The mixture will boil, vapor will go up, and then if we put cold water in the outer jacket, the vapor will cool and condense. So before we turn the heat on, we need to connect this reflux condenser to cold water. So we need 2 tubes. Okay? If you have tubes of different lengths, you want to take the shorter one and connect to the faucet, like so. So cold water will go from the faucet, and then you want to go into the lower joint of the reflux condenser. The water will be forced to go up, 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 up the jacket, and then take your second tube and put it down the drain. Now we're close to being ready to heat our system, but let me show you how to get that water on sort of gently. You want to take this return tube, the one that's going down the drain, and hold on to it as you gently turn the faucet on. You just need a little bit of water And see how it's filling my reflux condenser? Just gently, I have a little trickle coming out that return tube, and I just leave it like so. So holding onto the return tube while you turn the water on is helpful to avoid a problem. Okay. All right. Now, let's turn on the temperature controller. Okay, so I just turn this little switch. And now we need to choose an appropriate setting for the dial. You'll get a feel for this over time. But if water is your solvent, which it was for me, I can turn that to maybe the 7 or 70% point. Okay. If it's an organic solvent with a lower boiling point, you want to be more conservative, between the 30 or the 50%, the 3 or the 5 setting. All right, now we're going to get this guy heating. It takes a little while. The better the contact between the flask and the heating mantle, the faster the heating process will be. Okay. Now, the reason that we elevate our apparatus is that if the heating were to be getting out of control, I can simply reach behind the apparatus, unscrew that ring clamp, and remove the heating mantle without even touching it. That's the fastest way to cool it in case of disaster. You can always use the cord to gently pull it away too, if things were out of control. So that is why we elevate it. It doesn't have to be very far off the floor of the hood, but a little bit up so that we can lower the heat quickly to calm down any runaway reaction. So now that we've been heating the flask for a little while, if you look inside, you can see that there's boiling. Alright, so the vapor is going up into the reflux condenser, and this part is cold from the cold water that's running through the reflux condenser. Right, so it's cold. So that's where we're seeing the vapor is hitting those cold sides, condensing, and dripping back down. So if you're trying to heat your reaction under reflux for a certain amount of time, you time it not from the start of boiling, but from the time that you start to see those drips of liquid coming back down. I can reach behind the setup, unscrew the ring clamp, and without even touching the heating mantle, get it far away. Okay. You don't want to burn yourself by touching the heating mantle, so you could also use the cord to remove it farther. Okay, so that's the fastest way to cool a reaction, just simply take away the heating mantle. So I do that at the end of the reaction as well as turning it off. See how the boiling is slowing down? Once the boiling has stopped, then you can turn the water off back here. Okay. And carefully start to disconnect things. Now the only piece of glass that is hot at this point is this flask, so you can leave that clamped. You can even take this reflux condenser off and then disconnect the tubes. Try to keep those tubes over the sink until you've drained out the reflux condenser. You can take that tube off and just set it down so I'll deal with it later. If this is hot, then you can let it cool and move on with the instructions in your protocol.